Hi there, my friend. I'm Peter Barron. Welcome to today's episode of the Independent School Moonshot Podcast. I am thrilled to welcome back Tom Olverson. Tom is a search consultant at RG175. He's also a former head of school, a published author, all kinds of really interesting things that Tom has done in his career. And he was on the pod, I guess, gosh, almost 2 years ago, right after he had published his book, Leading Through Strategy, which is literally a book I keep a copy of it is on my desk. I refer it to people all the time. I think it's such a great look into how to think about strategy in an ever-changing market. And I was curious. I reached out to Tom and I said, it's been 2 years. Like, what have you learned since you've published the book? And so he's back to talk a little bit about that. And from what I understand, going to ask me a few questions too, which is fun. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But before we get into all of that, Tom Olverson, welcome back to the podcast.
Peter, great to be here. I always love talking school with you.
Yeah, it's always so much fun. And we're going to dig in just a second. But before we do, can you introduce yourself, your work at RG175, and your book? That would be great.
Sure. So I have been with RG175 for 12 years. It's a fairly small consulting firm, about 22 consultants. I split my time between head of school searches and mentoring heads. I probably do maybe 2 or 3 head of school searches a year and mentor 8 to 10 heads per year. And that's been fun. I love the combination. Mentoring the heads really gives me some insight into the kinds of challenges that they're facing in 2026. Before that, I was the head of school at the Rivers School just outside of Boston. It's a co-ed day school, about 530 students, 6 through 12. I was there for 17 years. And I drew on my experiences there uh, for examples that I used in my book, Leading Through Strategy. And then before I joined Rivers in 1997, I was the head of school at Seabury Hall in Hawaii, which is now a 5 through 12 co-ed day school, about 500 students on the island of Maui.
And so, Tom, it's been, gosh, I guess it's been a couple years now since you published your book. Really, the reason I reached out to you, because I was super curious to hear what kind of feedback you've gotten and like what surprised you the most. And if you kind of step back and you said, "Ah, I was going to write a second edition of the book," like where might you go a little deeper now as opposed to say 2, 3 years ago?
Well, the first thing I have to say is I've kind of been blown away by the reaction. I when I wrote the book, I was hoping, gosh, if I could just sell enough books to break even, that would be a win. And it's not like you make a lot of money selling books, especially in the independent school world. Um, but I'm closing in on 1,400 copies,
That's awesome.
and so that has really been gratifying. But what's really more important than that is I've just met some amazing people because of the book. People reach out to me. Their schools are having problems. Trustees reach out to me because they want to learn more about strategy and ask me questions. Heads of school reach out to me, and uh, it it's so gratifying and quite frankly inspiring to meet all of these dedicated individuals who are so concerned about the students that they oversee, about their schools. They want their schools to thrive. Many of them are facing incredible headwinds, as you know, Peter, as you working with schools right now. And it's made me realize as I listen to their stories that it's easy to sort of paint with a broad brush, but every school is different and context is different and the particular circumstances for each school is different. And I've really come to appreciate that and to pay attention to those particular circumstances that make each situation different. So that's been incredibly gratifying. So in terms of what sort of my thinking about the book, or if I were writing a second edition, um, you're going to be my guinea pig on this
Okay.
because I have done a ton of thinking about this over the last 5 or 6 weeks. Um, and I think if I were writing the book now, I would include a chapter entitled "The Strategic Mindset." Um, and uh, my definition of a strategic mindset for an independent school is evolving,
Hmm.
but this is sort of where I am right now. Okay, it's sort of the capacity to draw on different ways of thinking, in order to recognize challenges and opportunities, to gain insights into complexity, to leverage assets, and to chart a path to a thriving future for the school. Now, and that's sort of at the 30,000-foot level. Let me go down a little bit further, and give some examples. One of the things that I've realized in thinking about this over the last 5 or 6 weeks is that effective heads of school who are good strategists are really good at connecting the dots. They see the relationships between the various parts of the operation of the
Yeah.
school and even outside of the school. You've probably seen this, Peter,
Sure.
as
Absolutely.
well. To use a just a crude example, um, if a school says, look, we're going to invest some time and energy and better communication with parents about their kids' performance in the classroom. Um, the strategic head not only sees, well, gosh, that's gonna that's gonna strengthen our partnership with the parents, but it's also gonna strengthen our brand in the market
Yeah.
and drive people to the top of the funnel. And it also could lead uh, to a stronger annual fund because parents are going to give more money because they're more invested in the school and they
Yeah.
see the payoff. And s- heads with strategic mindsets are able to see these connections and see how investing in one area can have reverberations and create capabilities for the institution, for the school, that can open up more possibilities to strengthen the brand, solve problems, address challenges. And so I've been focusing on that. Another one, for instance, is I think strategic heads, or heads with a strategic mindset, are able to see patterns of behavior. They use their experience plus their curiosity. They ask questions and they're looking for patterns of behavior that help them make better decisions going forward. I mentioned in leading through strategy, I thought this was sort of a perfect example of, and it's a true example. A new head comes in, interviews all the faculty. The the teachers talk about how they set high standards, they really stretch the kids. But as the head visits classes, he sees, well, in actuality, the teachers are sort of meeting the kids where they are. And there's nothing wrong with that. Perfectly fine. It's just that it creates this disconnect between what he's wanting for the school and the actual behavior. And by the way, in this particular school, that was a learned behavior on the part of the faculty in order to, because the school had fluctuating enrollment. And they felt that this was the best way to keep kids in the school. And so his recognition of that reality in the face of a very different prevailing narrative is such a powerful insight in order to actually bring about real change. Um, And let's face it, I mean, a new head, they've at most, they've got a year of being able to have the objectivity of a consultant before they start drinking the Kool-Aid
Yeah, right.
and basically, buying into all of the narratives and using those narratives in their stories in order to sell the school. Um, Vision is another thing. Peter, I know you've written about this. I've read some of your writings about, strategy involves making choices. You've got to choose. And, if you're going to choose, you're going to probably make some people mad. And so do you have a thick skin?
Yeah.
Can you handle that? But even beyond that, can you create a vision that is more than just the vision at your old school, but takes into account the mission of the school, how that mission is lived, the history and culture, the market, the school's position in the market, and the opportunities in the market, and then the capabilities, and then not only just research those, but also use your imagination. And it's the imagination piece that is part of the strategic mindset to pull them all together to create that vision, or as Roger Martin calls it, that winning aspiration. And then you've got implicit in that is you've got to deal with uncertainty. You've got to feel comfortable with ambiguity. But if you're leading, you have to do that with a certain amount of confidence and conviction, because other people have to follow you into that ocean of uncertainty in order to realize the vision. And so I'm almost feeling like the strategic mindset, strategic thinking, whatever you want to call it, is kind of the operating system for strategy. It's sort of the day-to-day stuff and the day-to-day way of thinking that animates strategy, and that really prevents strategy from just devolving into a plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I am in, I'm super intrigued with that mindset and how to identify that kind of thinking. I think it can be learned, but I'm just super intrigued with this right now.
Yeah, it strikes me, when you talk about that strategic mindset, I love that you've spent time thinking about a definition. And I think when I really break down what it means to me to be strategic and to carry that mindset forward, it's a couple of things. One, you mentioned it's like strategy. You've got to make choices, right? At the end of the day, you could come up with a million different things, but you have to select the things that are most impactful for your community. But before you even get there, I often think about like, what problem are you really trying to solve?
Yeah.
'Cause I find that a lot of strategy is reactive to symptoms versus the root cause, and that requires you to really dig and take into consideration, like, the pattern matching that you were just talking about, like, being able to connect the dots to understand, "Oh, like, we think we're solving this, but we're actually solving for this."
Yes, yes. And you must encounter that a lot in your work with schools in doing strategic planning and so forth.
Sh Sure, and I think just in like day to day in general, right? Like, really trying to understand what problem you're trying to solve unlocks all kinds of opportunities for school, both from a strategic point of view as well as just managing it on a daily basis. And I see this a lot when I'm working with schools on implementing the school operating system, which helps you take that strategy work and actually start to live it, and just how you come together and how you meet as a team and how you spend that time together and what you prioritize and the process in which you use structure in order to get to that problem solving mode is really it's impactful. And I'll say that it's like it's not something that we're generally taught. I mean, I know for me, that like this was a learned thing. Like I had to spend a lot of time understanding how to connect all these dots and actually how to take strategy and make it real. And that's just it's weird. Like we get taught a whole bunch of other things, and I'm not just talking about independent schools in general. I'm talking about like every industry. Like we're taught, the basics around all these things, and then we get more complex and blah blah blah. But rarely are we taught actually how to make things happen. And I think that's kind of for me, that's been an interesting observation over the years.
So Peter, does in developing sort of these operating systems, these
Yeah.
protocols for meetings, let's say,
Yeah.
where do you find that those protocols help individuals become better strategic thinkers?
Oh, sure. First off, I want to say that like I did not come up with this. I got certified in this methodology and I've adapted it to independent schools, right? Like so there's a whole methodology behind this. But yeah, it's funny when I'm talking to schools initially about the operating system, I think one of the initial things is like, oh, people are going to push back. Like it's going to feel too programmed, it's going to feel too systematic. It's not going to feel like us, right? Like culturally, that's not how we operate. But what I've found in doing this now for a year and a half, couple of years, is that people actually really relish it. They relish understanding that there is structure. They relish a process to solve for problems. They relish prioritization, because because a couple things. One, it honors their time in a way that's really important. And I've said this multiple times, like especially at the leadership team level, Tom. If you think about all the people sitting around the table on a weekly basis and then add up their salaries, by far it's the most expensive meeting that happens weekly at a school. So like you have to be productive during that time.
Right.
And I think it's helpful for a head of school. I work with one head of school who has said to me, he's like, I can actually sleep at night now because I know we're going to get things done versus me waking up at night and like writing down things that I'm going to have to ask people to do. There's a whole system in order to perpetuate that and make sure that it happens. And so now instead of feeling frustrated that things aren't getting done, it just becomes second nature for them. And that productivity will, not only take place at that leadership table, but it's going to carry forward in other areas of the work that each individual on that team does. And
So,
so it's super empowering.
does that does do you see do you see the individuals and especially the head of school develop a strategic mindset as a result of these as a result of these kind of structures that you're putting in place? I mean, it's sort of a
Yeah.
behavioral kind of perspective.
Yeah, and you'd have to ask them, obviously, right? But my observation, looking at what the work that they're doing, is absolutely because you're not worried about how are you going to get things done. Like that
Yeah.
mind space is you've got a process in order to figure that out. And part of that process is making choices, right? Because if you look at strategy, you're typically looking at a 3 to 5 year time horizon for that strategy. And so there's this pressure feeling like we got to get it all done at once. Well, you can't. Like you literally can't do it all at once. So you have to be
Right.
methodical about how are you going to chunk out that. And I use these 90-day sequences, and we build projects over those 90 days in order to get closer to strategy. And we have to make real choices. Like when I'm working with the school on that 90-day process, we may come up with like 12 different things that they want to do. Well, they're not going to be able to do 12 different things. So we have to prioritize what are the 5 or 6 that a leadership team can reasonably adopt in order to move closer to that vision, which is what's driving strategy. And that process alone, allows them to see like, oh, we're actually getting things done because you've got this history of 90-day projects that's getting you closer to your annual goals, which is getting you closer to your strategy, which is getting you closer to your vision. And that's super empowering, and it frees up mind space. Well, that mind space that you'd be occupied with, like, are we getting things done? Like, are we being productive? Are we, running efficiently as a leadership team? That mindset is recaptured, and now you can actually put that towards the strategic work. And that's really the point of all this.
That's so interesting. So, and I was coming at it. That's so interesting. You're coming at it from almost like a systems, this a structured point of view.
When a school has an established strategy, absolutely. Like
Yeah.
that's the structured point of view allows them to take that strategy and live it in really interesting ways.
And the way I've been thinking about it over the last 5 or 6 weeks is um, the through the experience, or not the experience, but the lens of the leader.
Oh, yeah.
Does a leader have a strategic mindset that continually animates
Yeah.
the strategy, and continually introduces experimentation,
Yeah.
creativity, imagination, an
Yeah.
organic sort of quality? Oh, clearly this set of assumptions isn't working. We need to change our set of assumptions. And so that's fascinating.
Well, and, and I'm not trying to make this into a commercial for my product, but like what I'll say is that I think we're coming at it from similar perspectives. Because what the system allows you to do is to be iterative. Like that's the whole genesis behind it is like we're going to be trying things and we're going to be measuring regularly to understand are these things working? And every 90 days we're going to be adjusting to we're going to be turning the dial to make sure we're getting it to the right frequency and achieving whatever it is we're looking to achieve. And for the head of school, that gives the head a lot of maneuverability because now you've got this structure in place that allows the head to be generative, allows the head to be more strategic, allows the head to think about how do I continue to connect the dots, not just 90 days from now, but 180, 360, 720 days down
Right,
the line. And
right,
that's super empowering for a head because, like if you think about if you're a leader of an organization and then you have a leadership team feeling like that leader isn't organized enough to be able for us to be strategic, then you've really caused you've put yourself into a corner. This removes all of that, right? This allows the head to say, no, 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 we have a system. This gives me the time of day to be really strategic and be able to lead my team the way I need to lead the team.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I one of the things I've been doing over the last, 4 or 5 weeks is I've gone over my deep dive interview notes
Yeah.
with candidates, and I picked out the ones that, that really, had initially caught my eye as, "Oh, this person's really outstanding," or, "This person has some," and tried to find, some patterns
Oh, cool.
of thinking that came through, and all of them, the ones that really caught my eye were ones that they, first of all, they're incredibly future oriented.
Yeah.
They just were not, they refused to get stuck in the day-to-day problems.
Yeah.
They were just constantly thinking about, what is the school going to look like in the next year, 2 years? What are we going to do? How are we going to get there?
Yeah.
And so forth. And I have to say that that was not, they were not in the majority by a long shot.
Again, it's not, and I will, in defense of those who weren't,
Yes,
this is not something that's taught,
it's not.
right? And hence the reason why I do what I do is because I know that there are lots of leaders out there who have incredible strategic capacity, but they get bogged down by the daily. And so how do you, how do you create an environment where you are honoring the strategy every week while also dealing with the daily demands? And that's the balance that I've been able to strike with the schools that
Right.
are running this. And that's where if you can find that balance, that's where you can start to gain velocity,
Yeah.
right? That you can start to think about, we've got this 5-year vision. How are we going to get there? What does the work look like? How do I empower my team and upskill members of my team in order so that they can build additional capacity to achieve big and these great things? And
Right.
that's it's just it's super empowering. And but I think for strategy to work, you have to have whether it's with me or you use another system, like I don't really care. I just want you to be able to live your strategy and achieve what you need to achieve. Because as you
Right.
said before, it's like the industry's facing headwinds. And if we just keep running the same playbook, like I don't think it's gonna work particularly well.
Right. And I think the habits that we've relied on for years and years and years are much stronger than we might think.
Sure.
And
Of course.
and that
Yeah.
that breaking through with a strategic mindset, and with strategy is more difficult, uh, um, than one might think. It's easy to get excited, read some ideas, read a book, and so forth. To actually implement is a different ballgame altogether.
Yeah, but this is where I this is why I always reference your book, Tom, because I think at the heart of it, you're really advocating that if you're a new leader or even a seasoned leader, that you have to get to understand. You've got to understand your institutional history. You need to understand your market, and you need to understand like what problem are you truly trying to solve in order
Right.
to achieve whatever market position you're looking to achieve, right? Like as Robert Martin says, like how are you winning the market, right? What that winning aspiration, and
Yeah.
that's a mindset that I think is critical. And let's acknowledge that there's a group of schools that are just market leaders, are in incredibly fortunate positions, have amazing resources. They're having a different conversation, although I think some of these systematic things that we talked about before are just as important there as anywhere. But for the
Mhm.
majority of the market, it's like, all right, how are we gonna win our market? Like
Yeah.
how are we going to separate ourselves so that we can have the enrollment levels we need in order to do all the amazing things that we can do in order to support our students.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah. Tom, when you think back, like I guess the question I have is, have you ever thought about writing a second edition? Have you thought about adding anything
You
new?
know, I've been this. I'm so captivated by this whole notion of a strategic mindset. I've actually started doing some writing,
Awesome.
and I have no idea where it's going to go. But I've just realized that I've certainly had conversations with heads of school, successful heads of school, that never read Roger Martin, but somehow they have a strategic mindset. I don't know how they got it, but they have it. But at the same time, I do think that the the five questions that Martin asks and the sort of discipline that that implies can be helpful to a strategic mindset. In a way, they're kind of complementary. Because it gives purpose, and you're giving structure to strategy, but strategy can also give structure to a strategic mindset,
Sure.
so that you're just not sitting around dreaming. You're actually
Framework.
giving some structure to the ideas. Now, at the end of the day, what you were talking about is moving from the idea to implementation.
Yeah.
Uh, um, but even, I mean, you can sit around and come up with all kinds of great ideas, but at the end of the day, you need one idea.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
um,
I agree. And with the strategy work that we do, just separate from the implementation piece, is like how the question we always lead with is how are you going to win your market? Like, what does that look like for you?
yep,
And that sets you off on a journey that's going to require a lot of deep reflection and research to understand, like, all right, how are we going to win a market? What does that
right.
look like? Is it a new signature program? Do we just need to get better at enrollment? Like, do we need to do that well? Like, and what is it? Is it a market problem? Is it a marketing program? Is it a program problem? Like, it's amazing the conversations that unfold once you start to frame it through winning the market.
Yeah, and I think it's so relevant now because I've come across so many schools that are struggling with enrollment, and I hear stories.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's sort of it, I saw a statistic from NAIS about average enrollment for 2025, and the drop wasn't that great, but it's like the average drop in enrollment was, I think it was like 2 students or something like that. And it didn't, but it certainly doesn't jibe with what I am hearing throughout the country.
Yeah.
The pressures, sudden drops of enrollment, a softening market, even for schools that are are well established. They're not getting the numbers of applications that they used to get. So I think that's a major, major concern.
I mean, look, I think the conditions are so different. Tom, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you didn't have the same like menu of choices educationally that parents have now. Whether it's a public school, a charter school, a magnet school, an online school, a micro school, a home school, like just keep going down the line. There are a lot of different options now, and some are growing quickly, some less so. So you've got that, excuse me, you've got that. And then you also have the fact that just fewer kids have been born. I mean, like you can't debate the numbers, like unless you're in certain parts of the country like Texas or Florida where birth rate declines have been offset by migration patterns. I mean, it's a real thing. And I know when I talk to schools around the country, the K-8s are really feeling it right now. Like
Yeah.
it's just a different game. And you have a different generation of parents than Gen X and baby boomers who just bring a different set of considerations, right? And we have to
Yeah.
recognize that. And so it's just a very complicated set of circumstances that are going to require exactly where we started, which is like if you don't have a strategic mindset to understand how to approach these very real pressures that schools are facing, then it's going to be really hard. It's going to be hard even if you do have a strategic mindset, but at least the strategic mindset allows you to connect the dots in ways that can help you think about, oh, well, we've done it this way for a long time, but what if we tried this other thing, which could support this other thing, which could support that other thing, which is then going to get us to the problem that we're trying to solve. And that's
Yeah.
what I advocate. I'm just like, folks, we've got to come and look at this from a different angle.
Yeah. Totally. I also wonder if AI is bringing into question the value proposition, especially at the university level,
Mm,
which downstream is going to affect, independent schools, because and I think it's kind of reflected in, in the corporate world. It's we're not firing, but we're not hiring,
yeah, yeah.
kind of mindset that's going on right now. And I mean, let's face it, universities have been pretty explicit in saying, look, at the core of the value proposition, when you shell out all this, 70, $80,000 a year, we're gonna
100,000, Tom.
$100,000 a year. We're gonna give your kid's gonna be set up for a career.
Yeah.
Well, AI has kind of brought into question whether that actually is going to happen. And I think it's, in some ways, paralyzed, the parents, and said, gosh, maybe before I spend 40, 50, $60,000 a year on independent school education,
Yeah.
I'd like to see how all this shakes out. Is it I don't know, but it
Yeah, I
seems.
think there's so many different circumstances that parents are wrestling with. Some are very concerned about the state of the economy. Well, what is like out here in Seattle, where I live. I mean, it's just a different market than it was even 5 years ago. I mean, 5
Yeah,
years ago, independent schools had students lining up around the block to get in, and that's just not the case anymore. I mean, certainly you have a couple of schools that are market leaders for sure, but there are a lot of schools out here that are just looking at it and saying like, "What's happened?" Well, what's happened is, every week if you open up the Seattle Times, you're going to see some major tech company out here laying off a lot of people.
yeah,
And, it's not in we could debate the reasons why these layoffs are happening, but they're happening, right? And as a result, the economy out here isn't as strong as it used to be. And so parents are sitting on the sidelines, I assume, saying, like, I don't know how secure my world is right now. The cost of
yep,
living has gone up. Like, I'm gonna have to make different choices. And in terms of the AI piece, I I don't know. I feel like, independent schools are in a really interesting position with respect to AI because, this is going to be a dominant part of the workforce moving forward if it isn't already. And I look at my son who's a sophomore in high school and my daughter's a sophomore in college. And I've said this before, but like I've always felt pretty confident about being able to predict what things are going to look like 4 or 5 years down the line. I just have like from I just have no sense of it. Like, what is the job market going to be like down the line? But what I do know is that independent schools are really well positioned to take an ethical approach to AI adoption to help our kids be ready.
Yep.
And I think that's a huge opportunity, and that's gonna look different at every school. I fully recognize that, but, but AI is gonna be a part of the workforce, and the workforce is gonna continue to look differently. So how are we going to prepare our kids to have that strategic mindset so that when they do go off to college and then to the workforce, that they're in an enviable position in order to find, the careers of their choice.
Right. 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 Right.
It's
You
complicated.
you you d- talking about just the pain that some independent schools are feeling right now,
Mm,
throughout a good part of the country, and I'm certainly hearing it. I want to hark back on something you said earlier, which is, really spending some time identifying what the problem is. Because one of the problems that I see, especially as it relates to downturns in enrollment, is that there is, for a lot of school leadership, especially board of trustees, there's a tendency to immediately gravitate to very simple answers
yeah, we
without
need to
love.
market our school better. We need, like that's the one I hear a lot. And,
Yes.
that may be true sometimes, but there's something deeper at play that needs to be solved for.
Right, right. I hear that all the time. We're the best kept secret. If we just did a better job of marketing our school, improved our website, we would have all the students we need. And it's such a quick and easy, and I hear it constantly
Yeah.
as I'm working with schools. It's the go-to, and yet the problem really requires a much deeper analysis in terms of, the perception of the school, the value proposition, the tuition levels, the
The experience that students
demographic.
are having, right?
Right, and what do you have control over? What don't you have control over?
Right.
And even if you don't have control over it, you're still gonna have to make some adjustments. You're still gonna have to make some moves.
Yeah.
So, it's that I think you make such a good point focusing on what really is the problem here, and spending time on that, I think is absolutely critical. The other thing that I see that I'm advising heads of school who are struggling with enrollment is don't d- don't wait until you can say, "Oh, this is clearly a trend," because in 3 years
Yeah.
it it can drop off precipitously, and you may be in a lot of danger, and it may have a huge impact. If you start seeing some negative data in 1 year, pay attention to it, one way or another, whether it's on a tactical level, strategic level. At the very least, ask some hard questions. And is that coincide with what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think at the end of the day, like, if you're not paying close attention to your organizational health, right? Whatever those vitals may be for your school, enrollment clearly being one for virtually every school, if not every school. If you don't give it the attention that it needs, and within 2-3 years, you may find yourself in a position where you're dealing with a whole other set of questions and problems than you would be if you were on top of it every single month. And that's what I see, especially schools that are really boxed into a corner. It's like, oh, had we only done this 3 or 4 years ago, we would be in a much better place. Like the people literally say those words to me. And so to your point is like, don't let 3 or 4 years go by. Like that to me is like really sage advice, because it's a slippery slope. And once you start going down it can be extraordinarily challenging to recover.
Oh, it's for some schools. that I've talked to recently, it's like, the choice between bad and worse.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Right.
it's just,
It's disheartening.
um, it is disheartening. They just don't have any more moves left, because they waited so long.
But
And
in general, as we start to wrap up the pod, like I am an optimist, right? Like I think that there's immense opportunity
mm,
in this market, even given all the headwinds that are in front of us. But it's going to require a different mindset, and it's going to require a different way of approaching how we live our mission. And I don't think you could prescribe a single strategy for any school. I think every school is going to have its own flavor and take, and you've got to survey like where our assets, where our IP, our people, our facilities, our community, like all these things, like, and you're gonna have to take them into account to figure out what is the best pathway forward. But we can't just keep running the same playbook and saying, why isn't it working anymore? Like
yep.
we're gonna have to be willing to write a new playbook.
One last thing I'd add to that
Yeah.
for heads of school is I just heads of school have got to pay attention to that data. When you start seeing negative data, you can't. There's got to be a sense of urgency
Yeah.
and questioning. And I was reading an article about related to this strategic mindset about leveling and cloud to ground leveling, and that the best CEOs are really good at one moment thinking expansively and very, very big picture, but then have the ability to drill down and say, is our strategy being lived on a daily basis? Are we
Yeah.
executing?
Yeah.
And they have that ability to do that. And I think heads of school can't, they've just got to dig in and really question the key people and ask hard questions, and never take their eye off the ball when they start getting some negative data.
Yeah. Great advice. And Tom, as we begin to wrap up here, if somebody wants to reach out, maybe they want to grab a copy of the book, what's the best way for them to do that?
Copy of the book, best way is Amazon, easy to get, Leading Through Strategy. Just go to the RG175 website, and you can find my contact information.
Perfect. Tom Olverson, author, consultant, former head of school. I do appreciate it. These conversations are always so much fun. And I love how you push me. I really do appreciate that.
Great. Great to be here, Peter.